The courtroom cameras captured a moment that would break the internet and redefine what it means to be held accountable. Brandon Mitchell, a 34-year-old trust fund baby who had never worked a real day in his life, stood before Judge Judy with the kind of smug confidence that could only come from years of never facing consequences. His designer watch gleamed under the courtroom lights, his expensive tailored suit hung perfectly on his frame, and his carefully practiced smirk suggested he thought this was all just another inconvenience that someone else would fix for him. What happened in the next 23 minutes would become the most viral courtroom moment in television history, shared over 50 million times across every social media platform, trending for 3 straight days, and spawning a cultural phenomenon that would make his catchphrase infamous forever. But here's what Brandon Mitchell had no idea about when he walked into that courtroom. His wife, Catherine Mitchell, the woman whose family money had funded his entire adult life, was sitting in row 3 of the gallery wearing dark sunglasses. She had been there from the very beginning, watching him, listening to him, and she had already made a decision that would destroy his entire world. Judge Judy had spoken to Catherine before the case even started, and together they had set a trap that would teach this entitled man-child the hardest lesson of his pathetic life. Brandon Mitchell had perfected the art of avoiding responsibility over 34 years of privileged existence. He had never held a real job for longer than 6 months. He had been fired from his own father-in-law's technology company for chronic absenteeism and spending more time at the golf course than in meetings. He had launched 3 different business ventures, all funded entirely by his wife's family wealth, and all 3 had failed spectacularly because Brandon treated them like hobbies rather than actual businesses requiring work and dedication. His days consisted of sleeping until noon, golfing at exclusive country clubs, having expensive lunches with his equally useless friends, and then coming home to demand dinner and expect praise for his exhausting day of doing absolutely nothing productive. But Brandon had discovered a magic phrase that had gotten him out of every mess, every bill, every consequence for his entire marriage. 4 simple words that had become his shield against accountability and his weapon against anyone who dared demand he act like an adult. My wife will handle this. Those 4 words had solved every problem in Brandon's world for 7 years. The case that brought Brandon to Judge Judy's courtroom seemed simple enough on the surface. Harold Lawrence, a 67-year-old contractor with 40 years of impeccable reputation in custom carpentry and home renovations, was suing Brandon for $5,000 in unpaid work. Harold had spent 3 weeks building Brandon a luxury man cave with custom shelving, a handcrafted bar, and an elaborate entertainment center that would make any grown man jealous. The work was absolutely spectacular, magazine-quality craftsmanship that Harold had poured his heart and decades of expertise into creating. Brandon had loved it initially, posting 47 different photos on his social media accounts bragging about his amazing new space and tagging Harold's business with praise. His friends commented about how lucky he was, how amazing the work looked, how they wished they had something similar. Brandon soaked up the attention like he always did, taking credit for the vision while barely acknowledging the elderly craftsman who had actually built everything with his own skilled hands. But when Harold Lawrence submitted his final invoice for the agreed-upon $5,000, Brandon's attitude changed completely and immediately. Suddenly the work that had been perfect became adequate. The timeline that had never been specified in their contract became unreasonably long in Brandon's revised memory. The finishes that he had photographed from every angle and showed off to everyone he knew became questionable and substandard. Harold had called repeatedly over 3 months trying to collect payment for his honest work, and every single time he got the same response from Brandon delivered with increasing annoyance and condescension. I'll have to check with my wife about releasing that kind of money. My wife handles all the financial decisions. You'll need to take this up with my wife. And finally, when Harold tracked Brandon down in person at his country club, Brandon had actually laughed in the elderly man's face and told him, "My wife will handle this, old man, now leave me alone." That moment of casual cruelty, that dismissive disrespect for a hard-working contractor who had given him exactly what he wanted, had pushed Harold Lawrence to file in small claims court. It wasn't just about the $5,000 anymore, though that represented weeks of income for Harold's small business. It was about dignity, respect, and the principle that entitled rich people shouldn't be allowed to cheat honest workers just because they could. Judge Judy opened the case with her signature no-nonsense directness, her voice cutting through the courtroom atmosphere like a surgical blade. Mr. Mitchell, you commissioned work from Mr. Lawrence, a respected contractor with 4 decades of experience. The work was completed to your satisfaction based on your own social media posts. Why haven't you paid him? It was a simple, straightforward question that any reasonable adult could answer in 30 seconds. But Brandon Mitchell wasn't a reasonable adult, and what came out of his mouth in response would set the tone for his complete destruction. Your Honor, this is really more of a misunderstanding than anything else. Mr. Lawrence here did adequate work, I suppose, but there were significant issues with both the timeline and the quality of certain finishes that weren't quite up to the standard I expected for the price point we discussed. The lies rolled off his tongue with the practiced ease of someone who had been manipulating his way out of responsibility his entire life. Judge Judy's eyebrows raised slightly, that telltale sign that regular viewers knew meant she had already spotted the deception and was simply letting him dig his own grave deeper. Harold Lawrence sat in the plaintiff's chair clutching a thick folder of documentation, his weathered hands trembling slightly with a mixture of nervousness and righteous anger. When Judge Judy invited him to present his evidence, Harold opened that folder with the careful precision of a man who had built his entire life on attention to detail and honest craftsmanship. He produced the signed contract that clearly showed the agreed-upon price of $5,000 with no timeline specified because Brandon had told him to take whatever time was needed to do it right. He pulled out his phone and showed the court Brandon's own social media posts from the day the work was completed, posts where Brandon gushed about how the man cave exceeded all his expectations and how Harold was a master craftsman. He had screenshots of text messages where Brandon told him the work was perfect and he couldn't wait to show it off to his friends. He even had photographs showing every inch of the completed project, immaculate with staining, perfectly aligned shelving, custom details that most contractors wouldn't have bothered with. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Brandon Mitchell had received exactly what he commissioned, had publicly praised it, and then simply decided he didn't want to pay for it. But Brandon's arrogance was so deeply ingrained that even faced with his own words and photographic proof, he doubled down on his lies with increasing indignation. Your Honor, social media posts are just being polite, everyone knows that. I wasn't going to publicly trash the guy's work while we were still in discussions about the final payment. And yes, the overall structure is fine, but there were delays that cost me time and there were minor imperfections in the staining that a professional should have caught. Judge Judy leaned forward with an expression that made the temperature in the courtroom drop 10 degrees. Mr. Mitchell, I'm looking at photographs of this work right now. Point to one imperfection. Show me one uneven stain mark. Identify one specific defect that justifies you stealing $5,000 from this elderly man. Brandon stammered and deflected, talking in vague generalities about overall quality concerns and professional standards, unable to point to a single actual flaw because there weren't any. His designer watch caught the light as he gestured dismissively, a physical reminder that he was wearing more money on his wrist than Harold was asking to be paid for weeks of skilled labor. Judge Judy wasn't finished dismantling Brandon's facade of reasonableness. She began asking pointed questions about his employment history, his source of income, his financial arrangements. Mr. Mitchell, what do you do for a living? Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly looking like a teenager being questioned by a principal. I'm involved in various business ventures and investment management, Your Honor. Judge Judy's expression made it clear she wasn't buying the corporate speak. What specific job do you go to every day? Where is your office? Who are your clients? Brandon's irritation was starting to show through his practiced charm. I work from home managing my portfolio and handling family business affairs. It's a flexible arrangement that works for our lifestyle. Translation for anyone paying attention, he did absolutely nothing except spend someone else's money. Judge Judy pressed harder, asking who actually earned the money that funded this lifestyle. Does your wife work, Mr. Mitchell? Brandon's defensiveness kicked into high gear. My wife and I share our finances, Your Honor. It's a partnership. We both contribute to our household in different ways. She manages her family's investment portfolio and I handle the lifestyle and operational decisions. Judge Judy's slight smile was terrifying. So your wife manages millions of dollars in investments and you decide which country club to go to. Is that an accurate summary of your contributions to this partnership? The audience murmured with disapproval, the sound of dozens of people recognizing exactly what kind of man Brandon Mitchell really was. But Brandon, so accustomed to talking his way out of uncomfortable situations, so used to charm and deflection working on everyone around him, made the fatal mistake of thinking Judge Judy was just another authority figure he could manipulate or dismiss. He was about to learn that his magic phrase, the 4 words that had solved every problem in his adult life, were about to trigger the most devastating public humiliation he could possibly imagine. Judge Judy continued her methodical dissection of Brandon's financial situation with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. Mr. Mitchell, let me understand your arrangement clearly. You have no job, no income, no business that generates revenue. Your wife manages her family's wealth while you spend that wealth on golf courses, expensive lunches, and apparently custom man caves that you then refuse to pay for. Is that accurate? Brandon's face flushed red with indignation at having his lifestyle described so bluntly and honestly. Your Honor, I don't think my marriage or my financial arrangements are relevant to this case. This is about whether the work met professional standards, and I'm telling you there were issues that Mr. Lawrence refuses to acknowledge. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair with an expression of amused contempt. Oh, your financial arrangements are absolutely relevant, Mr. Mitchell, because you keep telling me you can't pay this bill. So I need to understand where your money comes from and where it goes. Now answer my question. Do you have any income of your own? Brandon squirmed under the relentless questioning, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. Finally, with obvious reluctance, he admitted the truth he had been dancing around. My wife provides the financial resources for our household, yes. But that doesn't mean I don't contribute value to our partnership in other ways. Judge Judy's laugh was short and sharp. What ways would those be, exactly? Brandon fumbled for an answer that wouldn't make him sound as useless as he clearly was, talking about networking and relationship building and strategic planning, corporate buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing when stripped of their pretense. Judge Judy wasn't having any of it. So you go to parties and call it work. Meanwhile, Mr. Lawrence here actually builds things with his hands, creates real value, and you think you're too important to pay him for his labor. That's when Brandon made his catastrophic mistake, the moment that would live forever in viral video infamy. Look, Judge, with all due respect, you're wasting everyone's time here. I've already told you multiple times that this should be handled between Mr. Lawrence and my wife. I don't manage our accounts. I don't make financial decisions at that level. My wife handles all of this. If there's a legitimate payment issue, my wife will handle this. The 4 words hung in the air like a detonated bomb. The courtroom went completely silent. Even Harold Lawrence looked up from his folder, sensing something significant had just happened. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into that death stare that had made grown attorneys with themselves on national television. Will your wife handle this? Brandon, oblivious to the danger, actually nodded with relief, thinking he had finally made Judge Judy understand the situation. Yes, exactly. That's what I've been trying to explain. My wife manages our finances, so any payment disputes should really go through her. Maybe we should just reschedule this when my wife can be here to sort everything out properly. Judge Judy's smile was absolutely terrifying, the expression of a predator that had been patiently waiting for exactly this moment. Mr. Mitchell, you've mentioned your wife handling things several times now. You seem quite confident that she'll come in here and make all your problems disappear with her checkbook. You believe she'll save you from the consequences of your actions like she apparently always does. Brandon nodded eagerly, completely missing the trap he had walked into. Yes, Your Honor, that's exactly right. My wife is very good at managing these situations. She's always been supportive of our lifestyle and she understands how to handle financial matters properly. Judge Judy leaned forward with deadly calm. Well, Mr. Mitchell, I have good news for you. Your wife is already here. She's been sitting in this courtroom the entire time, listening to every word you've said. Mrs. Catherine Mitchell, would you please stand up? The camera panned to row 3 where an elegant woman in her early 30s slowly rose to her feet, removing her dark sunglasses to reveal eyes that were red from crying but filled with steely determination. Brandon's head whipped around so fast it looked like he might injure himself. His face went through a spectacular transformation in 3 seconds, confusion melting into shock, shock hardening into horror, horror dissolving into absolute panic. Catherine? What are you doing here? How long have you been sitting there? His voice cracked on the last word, the voice of a child who just realized his mother had been watching him misbehave the entire time. Judge Judy answered for her. She's been here from the very beginning, Mr. Mitchell, watching you lie, listening to you disrespect this hard-working contractor, hearing you invoke her name like she's your personal ATM machine. Mrs. Mitchell, would you please come forward? I think you have something you'd like to say to this court. Catherine Mitchell walked down the aisle with measured, dignified steps, each footfall echoing through the silent courtroom like a countdown to Judgment Day. She was impeccably dressed, composed despite the obvious emotion on her face, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally found the courage to do something incredibly difficult but absolutely necessary. When she reached the front of the courtroom, she turned first to Judge Judy and spoke with a voice that trembled slightly but never wavered. Your Honor, I am Catherine Mitchell. I am this defendant's wife, and I appreciate you allowing me to address this court. What I've witnessed here today has been both heartbreaking and eye-opening. Judge Judy nodded with understanding and respect. Mrs. Mitchell, please tell this court what you observed during your husband's testimony. Catherine took a deep breath and turned to face the cameras, knowing that millions of people would see this moment and that there was no going back from what she was about to say. Your Honor, I have listened to my husband lie repeatedly for the past 20 minutes. The work that Mr. Lawrence completed was absolutely beautiful, absolutely perfect. My husband posted 47 photographs showing off that room to everyone he knows. He told his friends it was exactly what he wanted, better than he imagined. He bragged about the craftsmanship. Then when Mr. Lawrence's invoice arrived, my husband decided he simply didn't want to pay. This is what Brandon does, Your Honor. This is who my husband has become. He commissions work from hard-working people, enjoys the results of their labor, and then refuses to pay them. He's done it to contractors, personal trainers, service providers, anyone who can't easily fight back against someone with resources. And every single time, he tells them the exact same thing. My wife will handle this. Catherine's voice grew stronger as she continued, years of suppressed frustration and enabling guilt pouring out in a torrent of truth. I've been enabling this behavior for 7 years of marriage, Your Honor. Every time my husband created a problem, I wrote a check to make it go away. Every time he refused to take responsibility, I took it for him. I told myself I was protecting our reputation, protecting our marriage, protecting him from stress. But I wasn't protecting anyone. I was creating a monster. I was teaching a grown man that his actions have no consequences, that someone will always clean up his messes, that he never has to be accountable for anything he does. Brandon tried to interrupt, his voice desperate and pleading. Catherine, please, we can talk about this at home. But Catherine didn't even look at him, keeping her eyes fixed on Judge Judy as she delivered the words that would destroy Brandon's entire world. Catherine's voice cut through Brandon's attempted interruption like steel through butter. Your Honor, I need to make something absolutely clear to this court and to my husband. I will not be handling this. I will not be writing a check to make this problem disappear. I will not be enabling my husband's theft and dishonesty for one more single day. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs of shock. Brandon's face went from red to white in an instant, the color draining completely as the reality of what was happening began to penetrate his entitled brain. Catherine, you can't be serious. We can discuss this privately. We don't need to air our personal business in front of all these people. But Catherine finally turned to face her husband, and the look in her eyes was colder than anything Brandon had ever seen directed at him in 7 years of marriage. "We're far beyond private discussions, Brandon. I filed for divorce yesterday morning. My attorney has frozen all accounts. You have zero access to any money except what you've earned yourself, which, as this court has established, is exactly nothing." The word divorce echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Brandon literally stumbled backward, gripping the defendant's table for support as his knees threatened to give out. "You filed for what? Catherine, you can't just divorce me over a contractor dispute. This is insane. You're overreacting." Catherine's laugh was bitter and sharp. "This isn't about a contractor dispute. This is about you being a thief, a liar, and a perpetual child who has never taken responsibility for anything in his entire life. This is about me finally realizing that I've been your mother instead of your wife, and I'm done raising a 34-year-old man who refuses to grow up." Judge Judy watched this exchange with the satisfaction of someone whose carefully laid plan was unfolding perfectly. She had given Catherine the platform she needed, the public moment that would make it impossible to back down, the catalyst for change that years of private conversations had failed to achieve. Brandon cycled through every manipulation tactic he had ever learned, desperate bargaining pouring out in a pathetic stream. "Baby, we've been together 7 years. That has to mean something. We can go to counseling. I'll change, I promise I'll get a job. Just please don't do this here, not like this, not in front of everyone." But Catherine had heard these empty promises before, had fallen for them before, had enabled them before, and she was finally done. "You've been to counseling 4 times, Brandon. It didn't work because you don't think you have a problem. You think everyone else is the problem. You think Mr. Lawrence is unreasonable for expecting to be paid. You think Judge Judy is wasting time by holding you accountable. You think I'm overreacting by refusing to enable you anymore. But the only problem here is you, and I'm not going to waste another day of my life trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed." Judge Judy had seen enough emotional manipulation attempts to recognize when it was time to bring things back to the legal reality at hand. "Mr. Mitchell, your marriage problems are between you and your wife. But you owe Mr. Lawrence money for work performed, and that debt doesn't disappear just because your personal life is collapsing. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Harold Lawrence, in the amount of $5,000 for services rendered. Additionally, I'm awarding Mr. Lawrence $1,200 in court costs and an additional $2,000 in damages for the emotional distress caused by your lies, your disrespect, and your theft of services. Total judgment, $8,200. Brandon's whispered response was barely audible. "I don't have $8,000. How am I supposed to pay that?" Judge Judy's answer was brutal in its simplicity. "Get a job, Mr. Mitchell. Welcome to adulthood. It starts today whether you like it or not." Harold Lawrence sat quietly in his chair, tears streaming down his weathered face, overwhelmed by the vindication he had fought so hard to achieve. Judge Judy addressed him directly with genuine warmth and respect. "Mr. Lawrence, you represent everything right about this country. Honest work, fair dealing, and dignity in the face of disrespect. I'm sorry you were victimized by this man-child, but I hope this ruling restores some of your faith in justice." Harold could barely speak through his emotion. "Thank you, Your Honor. Justice is all I wanted. Justice and respect for the work I do." The audience rose in a spontaneous standing ovation for Harold, their applause thundering through the courtroom while Brandon slumped in his chair, sobbing uncontrollably, the transformation from smug entitled husband to broken child complete and total. Catherine approached Harold before leaving the courtroom, her dignity intact despite the emotional devastation of publicly ending her marriage. "Mr. Lawrence, I am deeply sorry for what my husband put you through. His behavior does not reflect the values I was raised with or the values I will tolerate going forward." She handed him her business card with a small smile. "If you need references for future work, please contact me. I've seen your craftsmanship, and it's truly exceptional. You deserve clients who appreciate and pay for quality work." Harold clutched the card like it was made of gold, overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness from the woman who had just destroyed her own marriage to stand up for what was right. God bless you, Mrs. Mitchell. Your courage today will help more people than you know. Catherine nodded, squared her shoulders, and walked out of the courtroom with her head held high, leaving her sobbing husband behind without a single backward glance. The video of Brandon Mitchell's destruction went viral within hours of the episode airing. The phrase "my wife will handle this" became an instant meme, shorthand for entitled behavior and refusal to take responsibility. Within 3 days, the clip had been viewed over 50 million times across every social media platform. Comments flooded in from millions of viewers celebrating Catherine's courage, praising Harold's dignity, and expressing satisfaction at watching a grown man-child finally face consequences. The hashtag #enablers choose accountability trended worldwide as thousands of people shared their own stories of enabling loved ones and finding the courage to stop. Brandon Mitchell had achieved the fame he always craved, just not the kind he had imagined. He had become the poster child for everything wrong with privileged entitlement, a cautionary tale that would be shared for years to come about what happens when someone who has never faced consequences finally meets accountability. If this story of courage, justice, and long overdue accountability moved you, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another moment where entitled people learn they're not untouchable. Comment below about the hardest boundary you've ever had to set with someone you loved. Share this video with anyone who needs to see what real accountability looks like. Because sometimes love means letting someone fall so they can finally learn to stand on their own. The next case we're covering will blow your mind even more. Until then, remember that in Judge Judy's courtroom, excuses don't work, enablers don't win, and "my wife will handle this" will never save you from the consequences you've earned.